After dodging Zishang's attack and retreating from the high platform, Duanling Tian originally intended to exert his full strength to strike the air, using the air resistance to generate a recoil force that would propel him back onto the platform. After all, there was a no-fly array here, preventing him from flying. However, after several attempts, he discovered that the surrounding air offered not even the slightest bit of resistance. His power surged out, as if plunging into a cotton ball, completely disappearing, as if it had never existed, not to mention the sound of an explosion. He couldn't even hear the whistling of the wind. What's going on? In his shock, Duanling Tian's mind raced through various memories of the Rebirth Martial Emperor. Finally, he found the answer, so that's how it is. If a no-fly array is set up by a Martial Emperor level inscription master, in addition to prohibiting martial artists from flying within it, the air resistance is also completely drained. Upon realizing the reason, Duanling Tian's expression changed dramatically. At this moment, he could clearly feel his descent accelerating. If he continued like this, he would likely be smashed into a pulp when he reached the bottom. Whoosh! Suddenly, a faint sound reached Duanling Tian's ears, causing his eyes to narrow instinctively. When he turned his head to look, he discovered that Zishang, who was falling with him, was still trying to attack him in this environment. In Zishang's hand, a milky white elemental energy surged, then transformed into a vast red flame. As wisps of materialized green wind integrated into it, the flame suddenly erupted. At the same time, the natural phenomenon above the void of Zishang's head was constantly changing. Initially, there were only 100 ancient horned dragon phantoms. Then, 200 more ancient horned dragon phantoms appeared. Next, 400 ancient horned dragon phantoms emerged. Finally, as the green key merged into the flames and the flames surged, another 100 ancient horned dragon phantoms appeared. I knew it. How could this Zishang, being only a void-prying, realm 7th level martial artist, be so fast, appearing before me in an instant? Seeing this scene, Duanling Tian's pupils involuntarily constricted, his face filled with shock. It turns out he comprehended level 1 high-grade fire concept and level 3 high-grade wind concept. Not only that, but with the fire-borrowing wind technique, his fire concept can additionally gain the power of 100 ancient horned dragons. Thinking of this, Duanling Tian gasped. He never expected Zishang's strength to have improved so much in just a few months. He remembered when the 10 Dynasty martial arts competition was held at Kangwolf Fort, Zishang was only a void-prying realm 2nd level martial artist. And while his wind concept was stronger among the two concepts he comprehended, it wasn't significantly so. Today, upon seeing Zishang again, his spiritual energy immediately detected Zishang's current cultivation, void-prying realm 7th level. He wasn't surprised by this, although Zishang was previously only a void-prying realm 2nd level martial artist. If Kangwolf Fort truly regarded him as their trump card for entering the Martial Emperor's secret treasure, they would certainly spare no effort in cultivating him. The spiritual fruits within Kangwolf Fort would undoubtedly all be used on him. With the combined strength of Kangwolf Fort, it wouldn't be difficult to transform Zishang from a void-prying realm 2nd level martial artist to a void-prying realm 7th level martial artist in a few months. But the problem was this. While a martial artist's cultivation could be rapidly boosted with spiritual fruits, concepts could not. Even with countless concept fragments, the speed of concept improvement was ultimately limited. Within Kangwolf Fort, there might be a profound enlightenment array, but a profound enlightenment array alone wouldn't be enough for Zishang to improve so much, unless he can, like me, integrate with it using spiritual energy. At this thought, Duanling Tian's face completely froze, his pupils constricting as he muttered, "Could it be that the remnant soul, suspected to be a Martial Emperor powerhouse, hidden within Zishang's body, has some means to allow Zishang to gain benefits no less than mine in the profound enlightenment array?" At this moment, Duanling Tian fully understood. Although it was only a remnant soul, it was, after all, suspected to be a remnant soul of a Martial Emperor powerhouse, so it wouldn't be surprising for it to possess some special abilities. Furthermore, the profound enlightenment array was merely an inscription array set up by a martial sovereign realm inscription master. For a Martial Emperor powerhouse's soul to intervene seemed to be no difficult feat. Just then, Duanling Tian's gaze, inadvertently sweeping past Zishang, noticed that as Zishang raised his hand, a 7-foot-long spear, a spirit spear, appeared in his hand. As the mixed wind and flames from Zishang's hand merged into the spear, the entire 7-foot-long spear was enveloped by the wind and flames, entwined with green and red energy. Whoosh! At the same time, above the void of Zishang's head, another 78 ancient horned dragon phantoms appeared. Seeing this, Duanling Tian was not surprised. As soon as Zishang took out that 7-foot-long spear, he recognized it as a Grade 2 spirit spear. A Grade 2 spirit weapon, forged by an ordinary Grade 2 artifact forger, could at most amplify 78% of power, like the 7-foot-long spear in Zishang's hand. The natural phenomenon above the void of Zishang's head now converged into a total of 878 ancient horned dragon phantoms, poised and ready to strike at any moment. Whoosh! At some point, a sword appeared in Duanling Tian's hand, a sword emanating an unusual aura, a quasi-emperor grade spirit sword. As Zishang's Grade 2 spirit spear trembled in his hand and thrust towards him, Duanling Tian did not hesitate. His elemental energy, like a destructive force, poured into the quasi-emperor grade spirit sword. In an instant, above the void of Duanling Tian's head, the power of heaven and earth surged, and a natural phenomenon rapidly took shape. 400 ancient horned dragon phantoms appeared. Out of thin air, a void. Transformation realm. First-level martial artist, with their elemental energy fully unleashed, possesses power comparable to 200 ancient horned dragons. The quasi-emperor grade spirit sword can amplify power by 100%. Based on Duanling Tian's elemental energy, it can amplify the power of 200 ancient horned dragons. Adding them together, it is precisely the power of 400 ancient horned dragons. This was even without Duanling Tian using his concepts, as various concepts seamlessly merged into his elemental energy, entwining around the quasi-emperor grade spirit sword. An earthy yellow energy appeared, and purple lightning flashed like a shadow. Above the quasi-emperor grade spirit sword, another incomparably sharp aura emerged. Not only that, but wisps of materialized wind also entwined around the quasi-emperor grade spirit sword. In an instant, above the void of Duanling Tian's head, the power of heaven and earth surged, and the natural phenomenon underwent a tremendous change. To one side of the 400 ancient horned dragon phantoms, 600 ancient horned dragon phantoms appeared out of thin air, totaling 1,000 ancient horned dragon phantoms. The combined power of the 4 concepts was comparable to 600 ancient horned dragons. Among them, 300 ancient horned dragons' power was attributed to Earth concept, Lightning concept, and Sword concept, each accounting for 100. The other 300 ancient horned dragons' power belonged solely to Wind concept. Before entering the Profound Enlightenment Array, among the 4 concepts Duanling Tian comprehended, only Wind concept was a Void Prying concept, while the other 3 were merely entering Void concepts. Therefore, within the Profound Enlightenment Array, Duanling Tian's Wind concept undoubtedly saw the greatest improvement, elevating directly to Level 2 high grade. Level 2. High grade Wind concept was comparable to the power of 300 ancient horned dragons. Facing Zishang's spear, which contained the power of 878 ancient horned dragons, Duanling Tian stood with his sword, a disdainful sneer playing on his lips. Above the void of his head, 1,000 ancient horned dragon phantoms circled, poised and ready to strike. Ha! Zishang unleashed a full-powered spear strike. The wind and fire energy on the spear surged, then transformed into a swift windfire spearlight, shooting towards Duanling Tian with fierce momentum. Because the no-fly array had drained the air resistance here, Zishang's windfire spearlight, despite containing extremely powerful energy, failed to stir up any whistling wind or explosive sounds. Everything was exceptionally quiet, a silence that was somewhat eerie. This time, let's see you not die. After the spearlight shot out from the Grade 2 spirit spear in his hand, a cold smile appeared on Zishang's lips. However, the cold smile on Zishang's lips quickly froze. Impossible! Zishang looked up, intending to see Duanling Tian's body pierced by the spearlight, but instead he saw a scene that made his liver and guts tremble. I must be dreaming, Zishang roared inwardly, staring at the 1,000 ancient horned dragon phantoms in the distant void. Zishang's pupils constricted, his face filled with horror, and his eyes brimming with disbelief. How is this possible? How could this Duanling Tian possess such immense power? Zishang refused to believe that any of this was real, and just then, Duanling Tian moved. Facing Zishang's silent and swift spearlight, a coldness appeared on Duanling Tian's lips, and the quasi-emperor grade spirit sword in his hand trembled, meeting the fierce spearlight. Sword-drawing art. Duanling Tian struck like lightning, the tip of his spirit sword pointing, touching the side of the spearlight. The power of 1,000 ancient horned dragons swept out, meeting no resistance, and utterly annihilated the spearlight, which contained the power of 878 ancient horned dragons. Bang! A loud bang echoed, which was the sound of the spear light exploding. At the same time, Duanling Tian, using the recoil force generated when his quasi-emperor grade spirit sword shattered the spear light, suddenly shot into the distance. That was precisely the direction where Zishang was. Zishang's body was still falling, but his descending speed was completely insignificant compared to Duanling Tian's current swift movement. Zishang! As Duanling Tian flew toward Zishang, his eyes revealed extreme coldness, filled with chilling, killing intent. Zishang had caused him no small amount of trouble in the past. The last time, he had almost been killed by 6 Kongwolf, Fort Elders. At that time, Tamo stood in front of him and lost his life because of him, blood debt paid in blood. In an instant, the quasi-emperor grade spirit sword in Duanling Tian's hand, its sword light was sharp and piercing. Seeing Duanling Tian use the spear gleam he had shot out to gain leverage and charge at him with his sword, Zishang's face drastically changed. At this moment, the 1,000 ancient horned dragon phantoms above Duanling Tian's head, following him as he charged, appeared like a flood of monstrous beasts in Zishang's eyes. The 1,000 ancient. Horned dragon phantoms bared their fangs and claws, lunging forward, growing larger and larger in Zishang's vision, impacting his pupils and making his heart pound with fear. That was the power of 1,000 ancient horned dragons. If it landed on him, he would surely die. Ghost old. Because of the anti-air formation, Zishang had no way to escape. He could only cry out for help to the wisp of remnant soul hidden within his body, his voice echoing in his mind, incredibly urgent. At the same time, Duanling Tian, who was charging toward Zishang with his sword, clearly saw a small black dot appear out of thin air between Zishang's eyebrows, and the black dot rapidly grew larger. Old fellow, you still dare to be dishonest in front of me? Seeing this scene, Duanling Tian naturally realized that it was the wisp of remnant soul suspected to be a martial emperor within Zishang's body that had temporarily taken control of Zishang's body. Immediately, Duanling Tian's lips curled into a cold smile. He raised his other hand, and a stone tablet with a small part broken off appeared in his hand. In an instant, the broken stone tablet trembled as if it had discovered prey, eager to pounce. Damn it. At the same time, a sinister, ancient, and aged voice echoed deep within Zishang's mind. The voice contained a hint of exasperation and genuine fear towards the broken stone tablet. At the same time, the small black dot between Zishang's eyebrows disappeared again before it could transform into a black flame mark. Zishang regained control of his body, but he couldn't feel happy at all. Seeing this scene, Duanling Tian let out a cold snort, casually holding the devil sealing tablet in his hand. With one hand gripping the devil sealing tablet and the other holding his sword, he continued to charge at Zishang. Duanling. Tian moved like lightning, arriving near Zishang's position in a flash. He would soon reach a good position to strike with his sword and kill Zishang. Ghost old. Seeing this, Zishang's face changed drastically. He once again called out for help to the wisp of remnant soul hidden within his body. What should I do now? If Duanling Tian succeeds, not only will I surely die, even you, I'm afraid, will not escape the fate of being suppressed by the devil sealing tablet. Zishang panicked, completely panicked. He had originally thought that with his current strength, killing Duanling Tian wouldn't be a difficult task, but he never expected that. In these past few months, Duanling Tian's strength had improved, even more terrifyingly than his own. With all his techniques unleashed, he could exert the power of 1,000 ancient horned dragons. This was more than 100 ancient horned dragons worth of power more than him, completely crushing him. There's only one way now. Throw out the devil sealing tablet fragment in your hand. That way, not only can you use its power to escape, but it will also resonate with the devil sealing tablet in his hand, making him unable to pursue you. Ghost Old's voice echoed in Zishang's mind, telling him how to survive in front of Duanling Tian. Ghost Old, if I throw out the devil sealing tablet fragment, I can indeed use its power to escape. But even if I escape, continuously falling, I'm afraid I'll still die, won't I? Zishang took a deep breath and quickly said, falling from such a high place, once I'm near the ground, if I don't have the devil sealing tablet fragment to help me, even if I exert all my strength, I'm afraid I won't be able to resist the downward force. At that time, I'll definitely be smashed to death. Don't worry. Even if you keep falling, nothing will happen. I can guarantee that. Ghost Old spoke again, his voice full of confidence. Hearing Ghost Old's words, Zishang's eyes lit up. He had been with Ghost Old for more than a day or two. He believed Ghost Old wouldn't lie to him. After all, this matter also concerned Ghost Old's own life and death. Once he died, his soul would be annihilated, and at that time, Ghost Old's remnant soul could only be trapped inside his corpse. Ghost Old's remnant soul, once exposed to the air, would be completely annihilated. In a short time. Ghost old, I trust you. Taking a deep breath, Zishang raised his hand and a stone block the size of 3 adult fists appeared in his hand. On the stone block were some ancient characters that were difficult to decipher. Almost at the same time, Zishang took out the stone block. Duanling Tian, who had already swiftly drawn his sword and was about to kill Zishang, his face suddenly changed. At this moment, he clearly found that the devil sealing tablet in his hand suddenly became restless, as if it had sensed something, showing signs of wanting to break free from his restraint. The devil sealing tablet trembled violently, causing Duanling Tian's body to tremble and the hand holding the sword also loosened. Bang! Just then, a loud bang reached Duanling Tian's ears. When he looked intently, he found that Zishang had kicked off the stone block suspended in midair with both legs. As Zishang's legs landed on the narrow stone block, he transformed into an arrow released from a bowstring using the momentum to swiftly plummet downwards, falling straight down. In an instant, Zishang's figure completely disappeared into the bottomless abyss, vanishing entirely from Duanling Tian's sight. Is he looking for death? Duanling Tian, who witnessed Zishang's body rapidly falling, felt his scalp tingle. Zishang doing this would undoubtedly accelerate his descent. Once he reached the ground, wouldn't he be directly smashed into a pile of flesh? However, Ling Tian soon had no time to worry about Zishang. He was surprised to discover that. At this moment, the devil sealing tablet in his hand, like the stone block Zishang had used for leverage, was suspended in the air, even lifting his entire body, preventing him from continuing to fall. This devil sealing tablet is truly terrifying. Even the anti-air formation set up by a Martial Emperor realm inscription master can't do anything to it. Duanling Tian tightened his grip on the devil sealing tablet slightly, then used the leverage to leap up, landing on the devil sealing tablet and standing up. At this moment, Duanling Tian was even more curious about the origin of the devil sealing tablet. Suddenly, Duanling Tian felt a tremor beneath his feet. It was the devil sealing tablet flying out, directly targeting the stone block Zishang had left behind, just like a hunter discovering prey. What's going on? As soon as Duanling Tian's gaze fell on the stone block, which was the size of 3 adult fists, he saw it also transform into a streak of light, heading straight for the devil sealing tablet beneath his feet. Immediately, Duanling Tian's face tightened. He pressed down with his feet, trying to stand as steadily as possible. He was truly worried that the devil sealing tablet and that stone block would collide, then throw him out entirely, and if that happened, he would only continue to fall downwards. What awaited him would be to be turned into a puddle of flesh. Soon, Duanling Tian realized that his worries were completely unnecessary. When the devil sealing tablet and the stone block were close to each other, they stopped at the same time, as if they had reached some kind of tacit understanding, giving off a harmonious feeling. At this moment, Duanling Tian, who finally saw the appearance of the stone block clearly, couldn't help but shrink his pupils, as if he had seen something that shocked him. Heavens, what did he see? On this stone block, the size of 3 adult fists, were carved the same ancient characters as those on the devil sealing tablet. Even the handwriting was identical. Before Duanling Tian could react, he saw the devil sealing tablet beneath his feet and that stone block slowly approach each other. After they fit together, not a single seam could be seen. The devil sealing tablet, which originally had a large gap, now perfectly fit together with that stone block, leaving only another broken corner. Duanling Tian was so stunned that he was speechless for a moment. This stone block that Zishang took out is actually a part of the devil sealing tablet? Duanling Tian looked at the devil sealing tablet beneath his feet, his face filled with shock. He clearly saw that after the devil sealing tablet and the stone block fit together, the characters on both also perfectly aligned, without the slightest sense of incongruity, although Duanling Tian did not recognize these characters. Now that the two were combined, the neat arrangement of the characters on them made him deeply realize a problem. The devil sealing tablet and this stone block originally belonged to one entity. So, now, as long as I find the fragment of the other corner of the devil sealing tablet can be restored to its original state, becoming a complete devil sealing tablet. Looking at the devil sealing tablet beneath his feet, which now only lacked one corner, Duanling Tian's eyes suddenly lit up. Remembering the terrifying power the broken devil sealing tablet had bestowed upon him after he demonized in the past, he could conclude that once the devil sealing tablet was fully restored, it would become even more powerful. Brother Duan. Before his thoughts could fully process, Duanling Tian heard a familiar voice from above. When he looked up, he realized that Feng Tianwu had also fallen. However, Feng Tianwu's falling position was not in the void where he was currently suspended, on the devil sealing tablet, which made him somewhat anxious. In his burning anxiety, Duanling Tian subconsciously had a thought, wanting to control the devil sealing tablet to move towards Feng Tianwu to catch her. Originally, Duanling Tian wasn't entirely confident in controlling the devil sealing tablet, but after the devil sealing tablet moved according to his will towards where Feng Tianwu was falling, he breathed a sigh of relief. Whoosh! Duanling Tian put away the quasi-emperor grade spirit sword in his hands moving like the wind, extending wisps of gentle yuan force, step by step helping Feng Tianwu slow down. When Feng Tianwu's falling speed completely slowed down, Duanling Tian reached out his hand, grasping Feng Tianwu's delicate jade hand, and led her to stand together on the devil sealing tablet. Brother Duan, your stone tablet seems different from before. Feng Tianwu looked at the devil sealing tablet beneath her feet in surprise. She was not unfamiliar with this broken stone tablet. Duanling Tian had even lent it to her during the 10 Dynasty martial arts competition several months ago. Because of this, she could detect that the current devil sealing tablet was different from the previous one. The small broken part had been half repaired, with only one corner still missing. Duanling Tian nodded. Staring at the peerless beauty so close, his gaze became a little hazy for a moment. He didn't need to think to guess why Tianwu had fallen with him. She must have jumped down with him. At that instant, a string in Duanling Ling Tian's heart was gently plucked, and it took a long time for it to settle down. Is her importance in my heart already greater than her own life? Duanling Tian murmured to himself. At the same time, his gaze towards Feng Tianwu became a little softer. A tenderness he hadn't shown in a long time, a tenderness only seen in front of his two fiancées. Brother, Duan, what are you looking at? Feng Tianwu had intended to ask Duanling Tian why the demon sealing tablet had changed, but when she looked up, she found Duanling Tian staring at her, the tenderness in his eyes seeming to melt, her heart completely. At this moment, she felt like crying. Even she couldn't explain why. No, nothing. Duanling Tian took a deep breath, withdrew his gaze, and forced a smile. Let's go. We're going up. As soon as his voice fell, Duanling Tian took Feng Tianwu and ascended into the air, riding on the demon sealing tablet, the anti-air. Formation could not prevent the demon sealing tablet from flying. Below the entrance to the Martial Emperor's secret treasure, within the towering platform, the young disciples of the 6 major powers landed one after another, standing steadily on it. What the hell is this place? We can't even fly. Many people cursed with a grimace. There must be some restriction. I guess there's a special inscription formation covering this area, preventing us from flying. I saw a record of a similar inscription formation in an ancient text. This kind of inscription formation seems to be called an anti-air formation. Anti-air formation? What an overbearing inscription formation. It directly deprives us of the right to fly. The young disciples of various forces discussed animatedly, and many began to look around. Besides the stone stairs on this side, the other 3 sides are all pitch-black, bottomless abysses. If you can't fly here, once you fall, you're dead for sure. Exactly. Just now, 3 people fell, and they're probably doomed. What? Someone fell? Yes. Which 3 people? You'll definitely remember 2 of them. Duanling Tian of the 5-element sect, and that peerless beauty of a female disciple from the blade and sword sect, and a young disciple from Kangwol Fort, dressed in white, with an extraordinary demeanor. After a while, many young Manhwa disciples from various forces learned about Duanling Tian, Feng Tianwu, and Zishang's fall into the bottomless abyss. Duanling Tian fell. Hu Fei came in later, and unlike the other 5-element sect disciples, he only now learned about Duanling Tian's fall into the bottomless abyss on one side of the platform. It seems even heaven is helping me. However, it's a pity about the 4 9-layered intent fragments in Duanling Tian's hand. Hu Fei muttered, his face full of regret by the end. Xuanbei of Cloud Sky Temple and Zhang Yan of Heartbreak Sect. Upon hearing that Duanling Tian had fallen into the bottomless abyss, both stood on one side of the platform and looked down. The bottomless abyss, stretching out of sight, appeared in their eyes like the gaping maw of a giant beast. Once inside, it was almost impossible to get out. Duanling Tian, it seems our agreement will be void. Xuanbei clasped his hands together and murmured, What a pity. Zhang Yan's eyes flashed, his face still stern, as if Duanling Tian's death could not stir a ripple in his heart, merely feeling a simple sense of regret. That Duanling Tian is dead? A group of disciples from the Sun Moon sect? Hearing that Duanling Tian had fallen into the bottomless abyss, all brightened their eyes, their faces filled with delight. Senior brother Ling Tian. Apart from Hu Fei, most of the 5-element sect disciples stood on one side of the platform, their gazes fixed on the bottomless abyss with a hint of sadness and regret in their eyes. What a pity. That Duanling Tian actually died. Nangong, Yi sighed. Not necessarily. Nangong Chen shook his head. Hmm? Nangong Yi looked at Nangong Chen with a puzzled expression, curious. Why do you say that? He doesn't seem like someone destined for a short life. Nangong Chen's answer was direct, simple, and straightforward. Nangong Yi's mouth twitched, and for a moment he was speechless. Junior sister Feng also fell. Many disciples of the blade and sword sect sighed. Had that peerless beauty just perished like that? Heaven envies talents. They're all dead. Good. Good that they're dead. Lian Shong stood aside, a delighted smile on his face, although he no longer dared to harbor thoughts of opposing Duanling Tian and Feng Tianwu. But when he learned that Duanling Tian and Feng Tianwu had both fallen into the bottomless abyss and were certain to die, he couldn't help but feel a surge of delight in his heart. Heaven's will! Heaven's will! Lian Shong's smile widened. In his opinion, this was heaven helping him. However, his smile quickly froze. A series of joyful cheers reached his ears. It's senior brother Ling Tian. Senior brother Ling Tian is coming up. And that female disciple from the blade and sword sect, they're coming up together. Senior brother Ling Tian is fine. Senior brother Ling Tian is fine. The five-element sect disciples, who had been looking down from the side of the platform, all brightened their eyes and cried out in surprise. At this moment, their gazes fell upon the two figures that were emerging from the bottomless abyss and rapidly rising. As soon as he learned of the anti-air formation, Huang Danyu's heart sank completely, realizing that Duanling Tian, who had fallen into the bottomless abyss, was certainly dead. Duanling Tian. Now, seeing Duanling Tian reappear before him, his originally lost eyes suddenly lit up, and he greeted Duanling Tian excitedly. Su Li and Zhang Shouyang stood by, their mood originally the same as Huang Danyu's, but now seeing Duanling, Tian and Feng Tianwu coming up, the gloom on their faces dissipated, replaced by genuine smiles. They're not dead. They're not dead. Su Li and Zhang Shouyang exchanged glances, both seeing excitement in each other's eyes. Duanling Tian isn't dead? Xuanbei's eyes brightened, and a rare smile appeared at the corner of his mouth. Duanling Tian, you really didn't disappoint me. Zhang Yan's eyes showed a hint of surprise. How did he get up? Through my testing within the area covered by this anti-air formation, there is almost no air resistance. Zhang Yan, who had investigated the current environment, knew that this area not only prevented aerial flight, but also had no air resistance. Therefore, trying to use air resistance to generate a recoil force to return to the platform from the bottomless abyss was almost impossible. A moment later, under everyone's watchful eyes, a purple figure and a red figure ascended from the side of the platform, appearing before them. This was a young man in purple and a young woman in red. The man was handsome, the woman beautiful, and standing together, they were like a pair of golden boy and jade girl. Senior brother Ling Tian and this female disciple from the blade and sword sect are truly a match. Talented man and beautiful. Woman, both possessing monstrous martial arts talent. They are indeed a match. Perhaps our five-element sect can consider forming a marriage alliance with the blade and sword sect. Many five-element sect disciples discussed animatedly their gazes when they fell upon the young man and woman standing on a chipped stone tablet, clearly held a strong hint of ambiguity. The voices of these five-element sect disciples clearly reached Duanling Tian's ears, who had just brought Feng Tianwu up, making Duanling Tian feel a little awkward for a moment. As for Feng Tianwu, her pretty face was already flushed crimson, as if it could drip blood, lovely and blushing, making one want to go up and kiss her fiercely. Duanling Tian, I knew your life wasn't that short. Huang Danyu cursed with a laugh. Although Huang Danyu's tone was impolite, Duanling Tian could see his concern for him from his slightly red eyes, and his heart warmed for a moment. Su Li and Zhang Shouyang also breathed a sigh of relief. How? Is that possible? Seeing Duanling Tian reappear before his eyes, Hu Fei's face turned ashen, and his heart, which had just descended to heaven not long ago, plunged into hell in an instant. Impossible. Impossible. He can actually fly within the range of the anti-air formation? Hu Fei kept shaking his head, unwilling to believe that any of this was real. At the same time, he began to size up Duanling Tian and the woman standing beside him. And finally, his gaze fell on the chipped stone tablet beneath their feet. Could it be this stone tablet? Hu Fei's eyes flashed, and he murmured to himself. At the same time, endless jealousy appeared in the depths of his eyes. What virtues and abilities does this Duanling Tian possess? All the good things are taken by him alone. Alas. Seeing Duanling Tian and Feng Tianwu appear, Lian Shong sighed, his smile completely gone. His current mood was nothing but helplessness. Isn't this place covered by an anti-air formation? Why can Duanling Tian and Feng Tianwu still fly? Soon, someone exclaimed, not knowing who it was. Immediately, everyone's attention began to shift, finally falling on the chipped stone tablet beneath Duanling Tian and Feng Tianwu's feet, their eyes all lighting up. It's this stone tablet. What kind of script is carved on this stone tablet? I don't recognize a single character. This stone tablet can actually fly in the air within an anti-air formation. It's definitely not a simple item. The gazes falling on the chipped stone tablet beneath Duanling Tian and Feng Tianwu's feet were all filled with eagerness and desire. Many people's eyes even flickered with greed, as if they wanted to claim the chipped stone tablet for themselves. At this moment, Duanling Tian also brought Feng Tianwu back to the platform, and under everyone's watchful eyes, he put away the chipped stone tablet, which was the demon sealing tablet. Duanling Tian hand over the 4 9-layered intent fragments and that stone tablet. At some point, a group of people surrounded Duanling Tian and Feng Tianwu. Duanling Tian, who had just landed on the high platform with Feng Tianwu and was immediately surrounded by a group of people, raised an eyebrow, his expression remaining calm. He calmly scanned his surroundings and immediately recognized that the people encircling him were the 17 disciples of the Sun Moon sect and the 19 disciples of the Azure Wolf. Fort Moltap, a total of 36 people. When the Martial Emperor's secret treasure opened this time, the major powers had an agreement. Each power could only bring 20 young disciples to share in the spoils. Therefore, each power only sent 20 young disciples. Of the 20 disciples from the Sun Moon sect, one had been killed by Duanling Tian outside, leaving 19. Now, apart from 2 black-clothed youths standing casually in the distance, the other 17 Sun Moon sect disciples had all come forward to surround him, their eyes filled with hatred and glinting menacingly as they stared at him. As for the Azure Wolf Fort, ours. Apart from Zishang, who had fallen into the bottomless abyss, the other 19 disciples, including Yeling, had all come forward to surround him. Unlike the hatred in the eyes of the 17 Sun Moon sect disciples, these 19 Azure Wolf Fort disciples stared at him with greed, as if he were some kind of treasure. Of course, he himself wasn't a treasure, but he had treasures in his possession. 4. 9th level intent fragments. A stone tablet that allowed flight in the anti-air formation. These were enough to incite the covetousness of most people. Hulin, are we really not going to join? One of the 2 Sun Moon sect disciples, standing in the distance, frowned. This doesn't seem right, does it? Lukai is our junior brother, after all. It's our inescapable duty to avenge him. What? You want to go up and die, too? Asked this other person's lips curled into a mocking smile as he asked indifferently. Die? You mean Duanling Tian can handle them? The former gasped, muttering. But is that possible? Those are 36 of the most outstanding young talents from our Sun Moon sect and Azure Wolf Fort. Even if all the people from the 5 Elements sect went up, they probably wouldn't be their match, right? The former added. Zhang Ping, you're wrong. Hulin's eyes narrowed, a hint of apprehension clearly visible in their depths. He murmured, that Duanling Tian is far more terrifying than you imagine. Do you really think he could kill Lukai with one punch just because he was slightly stronger than Lukai? I can tell. When Duanling Tian killed Lukai, he still had a lot of power left, even without using a spirit weapon. 36 people, though numerous, are foolish to think they can deal with this Duanling Tian. Hulin's tone was filled with gravity. Is he really that terrifying? Upon hearing this, Zhang Ping's gaze fell upon Duanling Tian, who was surrounded by the 36 disciples of the Sun Moon sect and Azure Wolf Fort, and he murmured in question, whether he's that terrifying or not, you'll know if you just watch, won't you? Hulin said indifferently. I believe that by then you'll be glad you saved your life. Humph. These fools, they wouldn't listen to me. They deserve whatever they get. When Hulin said fools later, he was referring to the 17 Sun Moon sect disciples who were blinded by hatred. Before the 17 Sun Moon sect disciples went to surround Duanling Tian, they had invited him, but he refused. Moreover, when he expressed his concerns, the 17 Sun Moon sect disciples called him a coward and said he wasn't fit to be the chief senior brother of the Sun Moon sect's current young generation. What are you doing? Seeing Duanling Tian and Feng Tianwu suddenly surrounded, many 5 Element sect disciples either changed their expressions dramatically or glared fiercely, staring hostilely at the group of Sun Moon sect and Azure Wolf Fort disciples. Duan. Ling Tian, as long as you hand over the 4 9th level intent fragments and that stone tablet from earlier, we can let you go. Among the group of Azure Wolf Fort disciples, Duanling Tian's old acquaintance, Ye Ling, the former number 1 among the young generation of the great Qing dynasty, stared at Duanling Tian with a cold, stern expression, and shouted in a deep voice, Ye Ling? Duanling Tian narrowed his eyes, a mocking, derisive smile playing on his lips. At this moment, the first thought that came to his mind was whether Yeling, along with the Azure Wolf Fort and Sun Moon sect disciples, had their brains kicked by a donkey. Did they think that having more people would be enough to deal with him? Duanling Tian, however, didn't know. The group of Azure Wolf Fort disciples who arrived later were unaware of the incident where he killed a 9th level void prying stage Sun Moon sect disciple, who had comprehended 9th level void prying. Intent with one punch. Otherwise, they definitely wouldn't have agreed to the Sun Moon sect disciples' request and colluded with them to try and deal with him. As for the Sun Moon sect disciples, they were mostly blinded by hatred. The Sun Moon sect was different from ordinary powers. Most of its disciples were recruited from a young age and underwent a series of brainwashing education. For the benefit of the Sun Moon sect, they would stop at nothing, regardless of gains or losses. Simply put, most of the Sun Moon sect disciples were a bunch of lunatics. Of course, there were exceptions, just like Hu Lin, the strongest among the Sun Moon sect's current young generation, who, despite being intelligent from a young age, was not successfully brainwashed. By the Sun Moon sect, a bunch of lunatics, Nanggong Yi shook his head, standing casually to the side, not at all worried about Duanling Tian's safety. A bunch of guys looking for death. Huang Dan Yu, Su Li, and Zhang Shouyong stood on the other side, showing no tension whatsoever, adopting an attitude of, "It's none of my business." Of course, the reason they could be so calm was because they trusted Duanling Tian's strength. The Azure Wolf Fort disciples are fine. They don't know Duanling Tian's strength. But those Sun Moon sect disciples, knowing Duanling Tian's strength, still dare to confront him? Have their brains been kicked by a donkey or something? Tian. Zhen widened his eyes, glanced at Tanhuan beside him, and voiced his confusion. Look at the gazes of those 17 Sun Moon sect disciples. They are different from the other 19 Azure Wolf Fort disciples. The Sun Moon sect disciples' gazes contain more hatred. The Azure Wolf Fort disciples' gazes contain more greed. Tanhuan, being very observant, easily noticed some clues. The former are probably seeking revenge for Lu Kai, the Sun Moon sect disciple killed by Duanling Tian earlier. The latter are undoubtedly instigated by the Sun Moon sect disciples, wanting to seize the treasures on Duanling Tian. It seems the Azure Wolf Fort disciples are being used as pawns by the Sun Moon sect disciples. After observing for a while, Tianjin nodded, fully agreeing with Tanhuan's statement. Senior Brother Yan, should we join? Just then, a dispassionate sect disciple looked at Zhang Yan, his eyes burning with eagerness as he asked. The people from the dispassionate sect had come with those from the Azure Wolf Fort, and, similarly, they had not witnessed Duanling Tian killing the Sun Moon sect disciple Lu Kai with one punch, so they were unaware of Duanling Tian's strength. At the same time, the other 18 dispassionate sect disciples, except for Qi, Feng and Qin Kong, Duanling Tian's old acquaintances, all stared at Duanling Tian with greedy eyes. Qi Feng and Qin Kong were the ones who had ranked 3rd and 4th, respectively, in the 10 Dynasty martial arts competition held in Azure Wolf Fort several months ago. Later, they followed the dispassionate sect master, Pei An, to the dispassionate sect. This time, with the opening of the Martial Emperor's secret treasure, having greatly increased their strength through the dispassionate sect's vigorous cultivation, they were all entrusted with important tasks to search for and plunder profound fragments from within the Martial Emperor's secret treasure for the dispassionate sect. If you don't want to die, you can go, Zhang Yan said with a cold, impassive expression, neither pleased nor angry. Just then, one person stepped out from the dispassionate sect, a gray-robed young man, almost 40 years old. He coldly swept a glance at Zhang Yan, a mocking expression on his face as he said, Zhang Yan, you, the sect master's direct disciple, are truly becoming more and more cowardly. If the patriarchs of the sect throughout history knew that a dispassionate sect disciple who successfully cultivated the supreme forgetfulness art was such a coward, even in the underworld they would probably be so enraged they'd vomit 3 liters of blood. As the gray-clothed youth spoke, the mockery on his face intensified, and a hint of jealousy was clearly mixed in the depths of his eyes. Anyone with a discerning eye could tell that he and Zhang Yan were not on good terms. If you're not afraid of death, go ahead. Zhang Yan didn't even look directly at the gray-clothed youth, saying indifferently, but I still have to warn you. If you die, it's just your bad luck. The sect won't stand up for you. I certainly won't be as cowardly as you. Ignored in such a way by Zhang Yan, the gray-clothed youth's face darkened, and he let out a cold snort. Immediately after, he called out to the other dispassionate sect disciples, Fellow senior and junior brothers, if you want to get a share with the Sun Moon sect and Azure Wolf Fort disciples, follow me. As soon as the gray-clothed youth finished speaking, he had already flown out, joining the ranks of the Sun Moon sect and Azure Wolf Fort disciples, staring at Duanling Tian with greedy eyes. Senior brother Wei, wait for me. Immediately, A dispassionate sect disciple followed, flying out. Senior Brother Wei has comprehended first-level void transformation intent and is a 9th-level void prying stage expert. Killing that Duanling Tian should be no difficult task. Immediately after, dispassionate sect disciples followed one after another. A moment later, the only dispassionate sect disciples remaining were Zhang Yan, Qi Feng, Qin Kong, and 5. Others, including the gray-clothed youth, 12 dispassionate sect disciples joined the encirclement, staring at Duanling Tian with greedy eyes. It's really lively. Seeing the group of people around him increase from 36 to 48, Duanling Tian not only showed no fear, but a hint of playful amusement appeared on his face. Tian Wu, you go first. Duanling Tian looked at Feng Tianwu and said, with a smile. Feng Tianwu saw the confidence in Duanling Tian's eyes, and for a moment she dismissed the idea of helping him, nodding understandingly. Immediately after, she took graceful steps and walked out of the encirclement, and the group of Azure Wolf Fort disciples forming the circle all made way for her. Their target was Duanling Tian, not Feng Tianwu. Behind Feng Tianwu was the Blade Sword sect, and they didn't need to stir up trouble for themselves. Surrounded by 48 young disciples from the 3 major forces, Duanling Tian smiled, his expression unfazed as if a mountain were crumbling before him. Duanling Tian, with death so close, I'm surprised you can still smile. Yiling sneered, her eyes glinting with a ruthless light. Are you so sure? The one who dies will be me. Hearing Yiling's words, Duanling Tian's smile grew even brighter, his tone indifferent, as if he didn't see the impending danger at all. In the distance, a group of 5 Element Sect disciples looked at the disciples from the Sun Moon Sect, Kang Wolf Castle, and Duan Qing Sect who surrounded Duanling Tian, their faces filled with mocking smiles, ridiculing their overestimation of themselves. They're really asking for death. Do they really think numbers can kill Duanling Tian? Many disciples from Cloud Sky Temple and Sword and Saber Sect showed disdain on their faces. Disdain for the disciples of the Sun Moon Sect, Kang Wolf Castle, and Duan Qing Sect who surrounded Duanling Tian. They had witnessed Duanling Tian's strength firsthand. A 9th-level void. Prying martial artist who had comprehended the 9th-level void prying concept and used a Grade 2 spirit weapon was instantly killed by his punch. Even now, recalling that scene, they still felt a chill down their spines. Duanling Tian's strength was terrifying. To this day, no one knew how strong Duanling Tian's true power was. Shenbei stood aside, his calm gaze fixed on Duanling Tian, as if trying to see through him. Playing mind games. Hearing Duanling Tian's words, Yiling sneered. Again, then shouted, Attack! At Yiling's command, including herself, the 48 young disciples from the 3 major forces sprang forward, pouncing on Duanling Tian, who was surrounded by them. As soon as they attacked, they used their spirit weapons, unleashed their full elemental energy, and their concepts followed like shadows, charging at Duanling Tian with overwhelming momentum. Overwhelming attacks, like rain, poured down on Duanling Tian. Because the air resistance in this area had been completely drained by the anti-air formation, the attacks of the 48 young powerhouses, though fierce, did not stir up any whistling winds or air blasts. The thousands of ancient horned dragon phantoms that had been circling above the heads of the 48 young powerhouses, forming a circle, now rushed into the encirclement. Thousands of ancient horned dragon phantoms charged out, baring their fangs and claws, pouncing in Duanling Tian's direction with overwhelming momentum. Senior Brother Ling Tian. Although they had confidence in Duanling Tian, seeing his figure instantly engulfed by the 48 young powerhouses of the 3 major forces, many 5-element sect disciples were still worried, breaking into a cold sweat for Duanling Tian. Above the void, the thousands of ancient horned dragon phantoms compressed together gave the spectators a visual shock, as if they were experiencing a visual feast. Big Brother Duan. Feng Tianwu stood by, a hint of worry on her pretty face. Duanling, Tian, you can do it. Huang Danyu clenched his fist, saying with a solemn expression. Soon, the expressions of the onlookers quickly froze, especially their pupils, which almost simultaneously constricted. Heavens! What did they see? They saw that, as the 48 fierce young powerhouses rushed towards Duanling Tian, engulfing his figure, their bodies also paused in midair. Immediately after, the onlookers only felt a flash before their eyes, as if a sword light had swept past. Then, everyone watched in horror as the 48 young men who had pounced on Duanling Tian, after pausing in midair for a moment, were all cut in half. Some had their heads separated from their bodies, some had their upper and lower halves severed, some had their legs cut off, and many had half their heads and both feet sliced off. Blood splattered everywhere on the high platform, forming a river. Rivers of blood flowed. Boom, 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 boom. Hundreds of dismembered bodies fell onto the high platform like dumplings, splashing blood flowers in the river of blood like enchanting crimson roses. At the same time, agonizing screams came from the young powerhouses whose legs and feet had been severed. Immediately after, they one by one collapsed to the ground, writhing in pain. Before long, they were covered in blood from head to toe. As for the other young powerhouses, they all became dismembered bodies, their lives completely withered, paying the price of their lives for their reckless actions. Ugh. The bloody scene made many young disciples from various observing forces turn pale and feel nauseous. Especially some female disciples who, while terrified and constantly vomiting, hastily closed their eyes, not daring to look at the extremely bloody scene again. Although they had all killed people to some extent, they had never experienced such a scene. To them, the scene they had just witnessed was simply a living hell, overestimating yourselves. At the same time, a cold voice spread out. After the 48 young powerhouses from the 3 major forces were killed or crippled, Duanling Tian, who had ascended into the air by stepping on the demon's ceiling steely, spoke indifferently, his voice filled with coldness. Soon, Duanling Tian's gaze fell on the 13 young powerhouses who had their legs and feet crippled and had fortunately survived, his eyes filled with ruthless coldness. Mercy! Mercy! Duanling Tian, I was blind. You are a great man. Don't hold a grudge against a small person like me. Spare me. Senior brother Yan, save me. Please save me. Among the 13 young powerhouses, except for the Sun Moon sect disciples who faced death unflinchingly, the disciples of Kangwolf Castle and Duanqing sect begged for mercy, and some Duanqing sect disciples even called out to Zhang Yan for help. There were 8 observing Duanqing sect disciples, including Zhang Yan, Qifeng, and Qingkong. Senior brother Yan, one of the Duanqing sect disciples, looked at Zhang Yan with a hint of reluctance, clearly wanting to persuade Zhang Yan to save their crippled fellow disciples. No need to say anything more. Everyone must pay the price for their choices. Besides, even if I were to act, I might not be able to stop Duanling Tian from killing, Zhang Yan said coldly, interrupting the Duanqing sect disciple, and at the same time looked at Duan. Ling Tian, a hint of apprehension in his eyes. He never expected that, after several months, Duanling Tian's strength had become so terrifying. With just one sword strike, without even invoking the power of heaven and earth to form a celestial phenomenon, he killed 35 people and crippled 13. The speed of that sword strike was so fast that even he found it difficult to track. Originally thought that, having cultivated the grand Tao of forgetting emotions, and mastered the minor completion of ice and fire dual heavens, I had left Duanling Tian far behind. But now it seems Duanling Tian's strength is no less than mine. Zhang Yan's eyes flashed, and deep within his pupils, a strong sense of battle intent surged. Of course, while he felt a surge of battle intent, he did not act, because he knew now was not the time. As for the crippled Duanqing sect disciples, he ignored them. In his opinion, everyone must pay the price for their choices. If there is a next life, remember well, before you try to lay claim to something, it's best to first weigh whether you have the strength to do so. Duanling Tian stood on the demon ceiling stele, his purple robes fluttering without wind, his cold gaze sweeping over the 13 young powerhouses lying on the ground one by one, his sword slowly rising in his hand. Mercy! Mercy! As, if realizing the impending danger, the surviving disciples of Kangwolf Castle and Duanqing sect all knelt on the ground, kowtowing and begging for mercy, their voices filled with genuine fear. Some things, once chosen, are difficult to turn. Back from, some things once done must be paid for. Duanling Tian's voice was clear and cold, speaking each word distinctly. Almost as soon as his words fell, the sword in his hand twirled into a sword flower, blooming brilliantly and splendidly. At the same time, the onlookers could clearly see a dazzling blood flower bloom simultaneously on the throats of the 13 young disciples from the Sun Moon sect, Kangwolf Castle, and Duanqing sect. Boom! 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 13 bodies fell to the ground one after another, completely lifeless. For a moment, the scene returned to peace, a deadly silence. The attention of the onlookers was fixed on the purple figure standing above the river of blood and mountain of corpses, their gazes filled with genuine fear and apprehension. Drip, drop, drip, drop. The purple-clad youth stood with his sword, and blood continued to drip from the blade, the sound not loud, yet clearly audible to everyone present. Many people, hearing this sound, felt a chill run down their spines and their scalps. Tingle, god of slaughter. At this moment, looking at the purple-clad youth standing on the chipped stone tablet, many people present inexplicably had this thought. In their eyes, this Duanling Tian was simply a god of slaughter. 48 young disciples from the three major forces were slaughtered by him in less than 10 breaths, leaving no one alive. They wondered if, even with Duanling Tian's strength, they could achieve such a feat. They were not afraid of killing, but to kill so many people with 2 sword strikes and to create hundreds of dismembered bodies, they admitted it would be very difficult for them to do. In a fit of rage, blood flowed like a river. Nothing could be more apt. Many onlookers were terrified, their agitated emotions long unable to calm down. Too terrifying. This Duanling Tian is too terrifying. Lian Xiong, the sword and saber sect disciple who had previously attacked Duanling Tian outside, his sword stopping near Duanling Tian's brow, turned pale, his eyes filled with extreme fear. Now, besides terror, only relief remained in his heart. Relief that Feng Tianwu had intervened in time and severed his arm. Otherwise, he would have been dead for sure. Hu Fei, who had been standing in the corner with a livid face after witnessing Duanling Tian's display of power, first froze, then his expression changed dramatically. He realized that after Duanling Tian killed the 48 young powerhouses from the three major forces, his gaze had shifted to him, filled with murderous intent, as if ready to devour him. No! No! As if realizing something, Hu Fei's pupils constricted in fright, and his body began to tremble. Uncontrollably, Duanling Tian's feet moved the devil's sealing tablet, carrying him in an instant to Hu Fei's front, hovering in the air before him. Hu Fei! Duanling Tian looked down at Hu Fei, his eyes filled with a cold, killing intent. Duanling Tian, you can't kill me. You can't kill me. Seeing Duanling Tian appear before him in an instant, Hu Fei's face changed drastically, and he frantically shouted, his tone filled with anxiety, deeply afraid that Duanling Tian would kill him before he could finish speaking. Can't kill you? Hearing Hu Fei's words, Duanling Tian sneered. And why not? He had long harbored a killing intent towards Hu Fei. Earlier, the threat Zishang posed to him made him deeply realize the importance of nipping the evil in the bud. Back then, on the peak of the Tianshu Peak of the Seven-Star Sword Sect, during his 2-year agreement duel with Zishang, if he had killed Zishang, all subsequent incidents related to Zishang would not have occurred. Hu Fei gave him an extremely oppressive sense of threat. He vaguely realized that as long as Hu Fei was alive, he would inevitably become a second Zishang in the future. When they were outside, Hu Fei's venomous gaze towards him had already made him realize that Hu Fei had to be eliminated. If not eliminated, he would surely become a great disaster in the future. At this moment, Duanling Tian stood in the air, stepping on the devil sealing tablet, looking down at Hu Fei, holding Hu Fei's life in the palm of his hand. With a flick of his sword, he could instantly take Hu Fei's life. A reason. Hu Fei was first stunned when he heard Duanling Tian's words, then hastily said, I am the Fire Peak Master's direct disciple. If you kill me, my master will definitely not let you go. He will definitely not let you go. Is that your only reason? Duanling Tian had thought Hu Fei would come up with some fresh reason, but who would have thought he would still bring up the Fire Peak Master, Chabai, treating Chabai as a protective umbrella. He had to admit, he was very disappointed. When he decided to kill Hu Fei, did he not consider that it would offend Chabai? He certainly did, but he was not afraid. Seeing Duanling Tian unmoved by his reason, Hu Fei's face turned pale, then green, and finally, with a thud, he knelt on the ground and began kowtowing before Duanling Tian. Duanling Tian, spare me, spare me, Hu Fei kowtowed, and begged for mercy. It was my ignorance that offended you before. As long as you don't kill me today, I promise I will never go against you again. Spare me! Spare me! Hu Fei kept kowtowing, and in a short while, his forehead was covered in blood, his face revealing genuine fear. It must be said that Hu Fei's actions surprised Duanling Tian. Duanling Tian never expected that in a life-or-death situation, Hu Fei would completely abandon his dignity and shamelessly kowtow and beg for mercy from his former enemy. Perhaps I overestimated him. How could someone who could betray a master who saved his life and nurtured him have any integrity? After a moment's thought, remembering Hu Fei's despicable past, Duanling Tian felt relieved. As the saying goes, a leopard cannot change its spots, and that perfectly described someone like Hu Fei. This Hu Fei really shames the fire. Peak and shames our 5-element sect, Huang Dan Yu said with a look of disgust. Except for one disciple from the Fire Peak, who had a complex gaze. All other 5-element sect disciples looked at Hu Fei with contempt. Tsk, tsk. Is this all the integrity the Fire Peak Master's direct disciple of our 5-element sect has? Just as senior brother Dan Yu said, he truly shames the Fire Peak, and shames our 5-element sect. If Peak Master Chabai saw this, he would probably be so angry he'd slap him to death, wouldn't he? Disgraceful. Too disgraceful. One by one, the 5 element sect disciples looked at Hu Fei, criticizing him with contempt. Even disciples from other forces now looked at Hu Fei with disdain. I never thought the 5 element sect would have such a cowardly disciple. And he seems to be the Fire Peak Master's direct disciple of the 5 element sect. How blind must that Fire Peak Master be to accept such a disgraceful disciple? Duanling Tian, a disciple of the 5 element sect, is profoundly skilled and ruthless, inspiring awe. But this Hu Fei, a disciple of the 5 element sect, is a complete coward, inspiring contempt. Disciples from other forces discussed animatedly, their words full of disdain for Hu Fei, and some even compared him to Duanling Tian, creating a stark contrast. The surrounding discussions were not quiet, clearly reaching Hu Fei's ears, causing his body to tremble involuntarily, but he quickly adjusted his mood as if he hadn't heard anything, and continued to kowtow and beg for mercy from Duanling Tian. Duanling Tian, spare me. I beg you. I beg you. You are a magnanimous person, a magnanimous person. Spare me. Spare me. Hu Fei kept his head down, continuously kowtowing and begging for mercy. But his eyes were filled with extreme shame and hatred, and he secretly swore in his heart, as long as he could survive for today's events, he would definitely make Duanling Tian repay him 10-fold, 100-fold. If Peak Master Cha Bai saw you kowtowing and begging for mercy before me, so utterly lacking in integrity, I'm afraid he wouldn't need me to act. He would personally kill you, wouldn't he? Duanling Tian raised his sword. His eyes slightly narrowed and said indifferently. Seeing Duanling Tian raise his sword out of the corner of his eye, preparing to kill him, Hu Fei's face changed drastically, and he hastily stopped kowtowing and begging for mercy, as if realizing that disaster was imminent. His gaze shifted to a 5 element sect Fire Peak disciple standing nearby, and he transmitted his elemental energy into the other person's ear. If you do as I say, I refuse to believe that the strongest young powerhouses from all major forces combined can't kill him. After a series of elemental energy transmissions, Hu Fei looked at Duanling Tian and roared, Duanling Tian, I'll be waiting for you on the road to the underworld. Duanling Tian never expected that at the very last moment of life and death, Hu Fei would finally stop kowtowing and begging for mercy. His dignity and integrity seemed to awaken in an instant. Then you probably won't be waiting long. Soon, Duanling Tian's face turned cold, his sword rose and fell, and with one strike, he ended the life of Hu Fei, who had no power to resist before him. Boom! Only when Hu Fei's body fell to the ground did Duanling Tian finally let out a sigh of relief. He knew in his heart that he had eliminated a potential threat. However, at this moment, Duanling Tian did not notice. Among a group of 5 element sect disciples, one Fire Peak disciple was looking at Hu Fei's corpse, his eyes filled with grief and indignation, but he ultimately gritted his teeth and did not reveal his emotions. Seeing Hu Fei turn into a corpse, a group of 5 element sect disciples couldn't help but sigh, yet no one felt sorry for Hu Fei. Hu Fei had a bad reputation in the 5 element sect, known as a white-eyed wolf. Apparently, Hu Fei's absurd act of betraying his master, who saved his life in the wood peak that nurtured him, only to switch to the Fire Peak, still made it difficult for many 5 element sect disciples to let go. Duanling Tian killed Hu Fei with a flick of his wrist, startling many young disciples from the other 4 major forces, who feared that Duanling Tian would attack them. Duanling Tian's decisive action filled them with fear from the bottom of their hearts. You are very smart. Under everyone's gaze, after killing Hu Fei, Duanling Tian looked at the 2 black-clad youths standing alone, the 2 surviving young disciples of the Sun Moon sect, and slowly spoke. The reason these 2 Sun Moon sect disciples were still alive was that they had not participated in the encirclement and attack against Duanling Tian just now. Otherwise, they would surely be dead. In the distance, the Sun Moon sect disciples, whose faces changed when they saw Duanling Tian look over, all breathed a sigh of relief after hearing Duanling Tian's words. Now, how do you feel? Hu Lin, the foremost young expert of the current generation of the Sun Moon sect, took a deep breath and asked the person beside him, Zhang Ping, the second foremost young expert of the current generation of the Sun Moon sect, who stood beside him, was sweating profusely on his forehead, and hearing Hu Lin's words, he couldn't help but smile bitterly. Luckily, I listened to you. Hu Lin, I owe you my life. One should know that he had originally planned to join the other Sun Moon sect disciples in attacking Duanling Tian to avenge Lu Kai. At the crucial moment, it was Hu Lin who stopped him. Thinking of the methods Duanling Tian had just displayed, cold sweat continuously poured from his forehead, more and more, like rain. Duanling Tian, I am now looking forward to a battle with you even more. After we leave the Martial Emperor's secret treasure this time, how about a fight between us? Ruanbei, the foremost young expert of the current generation of Yunkong Temple, who had been standing quietly aside, looked at Duanling. Tian, with narrowed eyes, and said directly, "Gladly." Duanling Tian shrugged indifferently, then added, "However, our battle doesn't necessarily have to wait until we leave the Martial Emperor's secret treasure. As long as you find any treasure in the Martial Emperor's secret treasure that interests me, we are bound to have a confrontation." "What, you still want to snatch things from my hands?" Hearing Duanling Tian's words, Xuanbei's eyes narrowed. "Of course. As long as you have something that interests me, I will snatch it," Duanling Tian said as a matter of course. Good. Then I'll be waiting." Xuanbei took a deep breath and said with anticipation, "Let's go." At this moment, Zhang Yan's voice came from afar. Immediately after, Zhang Yan led Qi Feng, Qin Kong, and 7 other emotion-severing sect disciples down the stone steps, on one side of the stone platform, heading towards that dark, bottomless abyss. Follow up. At the same time, Xuanbei greeted a group of Yunkong Temple disciples and followed them. The only 2 surviving young disciples of the Sun Moon sect stepped out and followed behind the group of Yunkong Temple young disciples walking down the stone steps. The Sun Moon sect is truly miserable. Out of 20 young disciples, 1 was killed by senior brother Ling Tian outside, and then 17 were killed by senior brother Ling Tian here, leaving only 2 now. If you ask me, Kanglan Castle is the truly unlucky one. Many 5 Element sect disciples whispered to each other. Yes, the most unlucky one was Azure Wolf Fort. 20 disciples from Azure Wolf Fort came. First, one unlucky fellow, overestimating himself, launched a sneak attack on Senior, Brother Ling Tian, causing himself to lose his footing and fall into the bottomless abyss, a place of certain death. The remaining 19 disciples, coveting the treasure in Senior Brother Ling Tian's hand, were all counter-killed. If the 5 deputy fort masters of Azure Wolf Fort knew all this, they would probably be so angry they'd spit. 3 liters of blood. That's for sure. 20 people from Azure Wolf Fort came, and they were all wiped out before even getting deep into the Martial Emperor's secret treasure. If they knew, they'd definitely die of anger. A group of 5 Element sect disciples discussed animatedly, their faces alight with excitement, when they looked at the purple-clad youth who slowly descended after putting away the chipped stone tablet. Their eyes were, without exception, filled with awe. Senior brother Ling Tian is too strong. Indeed, although I had confidence in him, when I saw him being surrounded and attacked by 48 young powerhouses just now, I couldn't help but break out in a cold sweat for him. Me too. But I never expected that to deal with 48. Young powerhouses, senior brother Ling Tian would only need 1 sword strike to kill most of them. The remaining few, though not dead, were all crippled and unable to fight anymore. I've decided, this trip to the Martial Emperor's secret treasure, I'll just follow senior brother Ling Tian. Senior brother Ling Tian eats meat, and I'll follow him, only needing a sip of soup. You're a smart one, kid. As Duanling Tian put away the demon sealing tablet and landed beside Feng Tianwu, Huang Danyu, Su Li, and Zhang Shuyong, he heard these words and couldn't help but smile wryly. A group of sword and saber sect disciples stood quietly to the side, their gazes at Duanling Tian also filled with awe. Duanling Tian, am I destined to be stepped on by you my entire life, forever unable to surpass you? A sword and saber sect disciple's gaze fell on Duanling Tian, his face filled with complexity. It was Long Yun, once saber young master, and one of the 5 young masters of the Azure Forest Imperial Kingdom, by a stroke of luck became a disciple of Saber 5, the deputy master of the Saber Gate of the Sword and Saber sect, and made rapid progress on his cultivation path. Later, he stood out in the genius competition of the Azure Forest Imperial Kingdom, competing against young powerhouses from empires and dynasties, and earning the qualification to participate in the 10 Dynasty Martial Competition. Now, he had returned with Saber 5 to the Saber Gate within the Sword and Saber sect, officially becoming a Saber Gate disciple. This time, he was one of the 20 young disciples from the Sword and Saber sect who entered the Martial Emperor's secret treasure. Who would have thought that the young man who first showed his talent at the martial competition of the 5 great sects in the Azure Forest Imperial Kingdom a few years ago has now grown to such an extent? Long Yun sighed inwardly, feeling a little lost. Let's go. Seeing that everyone's gaze was still on him, Duanling Tian smiled faintly, called out to them, and then led the way down the stone steps on the side of the high platform. As Duanling Tian moved, Feng Tianwu followed closely. Behind them were Huang Danyu, Su Li, and Zhang Shuyong. Immediately, a group of 5 Element sect disciples and sword and saber sect disciples also followed one by one. The 5 Element sect disciples were led by Duanling Tian. The sword and saber sect disciples were led by Feng Tianwu, Nangong Chen, and Nangong Yi, the 2 brothers, followed behind. looking at the purple-clad youth leading the way, their eyes filled with complex emotions. Once upon a time, the most dazzling young disciples of the Five Element sect were the two brothers. But ever since Duanling Tian appeared, he had taken away all the glory that originally belonged to them. If we don't work harder, we might never be able to surpass him in this lifetime, Nanggong Yi said with a wry smile. Although Duanling Tian had taken away the glory that originally belonged to him, he did not feel any dissatisfaction towards Duanling Tian because of it. Because Duanling Tian had taken away his glory by relying on his own strength, not by any underhanded means, perhaps he had lost, but he had lost convinced. In his opinion, to reclaim glory, one must surpass Duanling Tian, and at that time his glory would naturally return. I will surpass him. Nanggong Chen's words were as few as before. He was a man of few words, but his tone revealed an unwavering determination, and his eyes flickered with a captivating brilliance. Clearly, due to Duanling Tian's powerful rise, the Nanggong brothers felt immense pressure. This pressure was something they had never encountered before. At this moment, their martial Tao heart was tempered to be even purer, and they now had a common goal: surpass Duanling Tian. Between us, two brothers, whoever surpasses him first will be the elder brother. You don't have any objections, do you? Nanggong Yi looked at Nanggong Chen, raising an eyebrow, wanting to make such a bet between twin brothers. Then you just wait to call me big brother, Nanggong Chen said coolly, his face stern. We'll see. Nanggong Yi's eyes flashed as he murmured. He knew that his strength was currently inferior to Nanggong Chen's. The reason he made such a bet with Nanggong Chen was more to motivate himself to catch up, and even surpass Duanling Tian. Without pressure, where would the motivation come from? Duanling Tian was naturally unaware of what was happening between the Nanggong brothers, and even less aware that the Nanggong brothers regarded him as a benchmark, striving with him as their goal. It's getting darker and darker. Duanling Tian and Feng Tianwo led the way, taking a group of 5 Element sect and sword and saber sect disciples down the stone steps. In front, the figures of the Yunкong Temple disciples, led by Xuan Bei and the Two Sun Moon cult. Disciples gradually disappeared from their sight, leaving only a patch of darkness. At some point, a firelight rose, as a surging flame erupted from Feng Tianwu, illuminating the surroundings. However, the illuminated area was ultimately limited. Nevertheless, after the flames from Feng Tianwu rose and illuminated the surroundings, a ball of flame also rose among the Yunкong Temple group, clearly inspired by Feng Tianwu. A moment later, in front of the Yunкong Temple group and the Two Sun Moon cult disciples, another ball of flame also rose. That was where the emotional severing sect group, led by Zhang Yan, was located. Now, with the emotion severing sect, Yunкong Temple, and Sun Moon cult people leading the way, the disciples of the 5 Element sect and sword and saber sect couldn't help but breathe. A sigh of relief following unhurriedly behind. How long is this stone staircase anyway? An hour later, the stone staircase remained, still not reaching its end. Duanling Tian's eyes couldn't help but narrow, and a hint of doubt appeared on his face. The emotion-severing sect people have turned. A 5 Element sect disciple, exclaimed startling Duanling Tian. Duanling Tian looked up at the sound, only to find that the foremost ball of fire was moving to the left. As for the specific situation, it was too far away to see clearly. A moment later, the emotion-severing sect people moved to the lower left within Duanling Tian's group's line of sight. After another while, the Yunкong Temple group and the 2 Sun Moon cult disciples also turned left and followed down. Moving closer, through the rising firelight from Feng Tianwu, Duanling Tian could see that the stone staircase had reached its end. Of course, only the stone staircase in this direction had reached its end. The stone staircase ahead suddenly turned, leading to the lower left, opening up a new unknown path. This stone staircase, it can't be endless, can it? As Duanling Tian and the others turned left and continued downwards, Huang Danyu couldn't help but frown. We've been walking for over an hour now. Huh? They've sped up? Before Huang Danyu finished speaking, he noticed that the firelight from the emotion-severing sect group suddenly accelerated and shot forward. The Yunкong Temple's firelight also accelerated. Keep up! Duanling Tian raised an eyebrow, called out to the others, and flew to follow. Whoosh, 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 whoosh! Immediately, the disciples of the 5 Element sect and sword and saber sect followed one by one, above the magnificent gate of the Martial Emperor's secret treasure, entrance and exit. Outside a layer of gray light barrier, the high-ranking officials of the 6 major forces stood there, their gazes fixed on the gray light barrier, trying to penetrate it and see what was inside. As early as when Duanling Tian was the first to pass through the gray light barrier and reach the high platform, the gray light barrier had become even deeper, making it impossible for those outside to see what was inside. Therefore, after Duanling Tian entered, those outside had no idea what happened inside. Sword 13, Saber 5, I originally thought Duan Lingtian would join your sword and saber sect, but I didn't expect him to end up joining the Five Elements sect. Ningkan, the deputy fort master of Azure Wolf Fort, looked at the two middle-aged men, not far away, a hint of sarcasm on his face. Hearing Ningkan's words, Saber Five's face darkened and he angrily said, "Ningkan, how dare you even mention it? If it weren't for your Azure Wolf Fort meddling back then, how would Duan Lingtian have suddenly disappeared?" Sword 13's face was also very grim. Ningkan's words were undoubtedly rubbing salt into the sword and saber sect's wounds. If it weren't for the Azure Wolf Fort's interference back then, attempting to take Duan Lingtian away, how would the subsequent events have occurred? How would Duan Lingtian have disappeared? Listen, you five, after the young ones emerge from the Martial Emperor's secret treasure, we two old geezers will have to make a trip to your Azure Wolf Fort and demand an explanation from Qing Lang. At this moment, the Sabergate master of the Yishou sword and saber sect snorted coldly, his knife-like gaze sweeping over the 5 deputy fort masters of Azure Wolf Fort. If Qing Lang cannot give us a satisfactory explanation, this old body of mine will have to move a bit, the Swordgate master also said in a deep voice. They had known about that incident several months ago, but at the time, they hadn't taken it to heart. In their view at the time, there was no need for them to fall out with Azure Wolf Fort over a prospective Swordgate disciple, who hadn't even joined the sect yet, but they never expected that the prospective Swordgate disciple they had completely disregarded possessed talent and comprehension that even shocked them. Under 30 years old, with just one punch, he killed a 9th-level void-prying martial artist who used a Grade 2 spirit weapon, and had comprehended 9th-level void-prying intent. Such a monster with such talent and comprehension had never appeared. In the history of their sword and saber sect, such a peerless talent, a young powerhouse, was prevented from joining their blade sect and becoming their disciple, all because of the Kang Wolf Fort. How could they not be enraged? Upon hearing the words of the 2 blade sect masters, the 5 vice fort masters of Kang Wolf Fort merely frowned, not taking it to heart. If the 2 old men from the blade sect could deal with their fort master of Kang Wolf Fort, their fort would not have been able to pass down through generations and stand tall until now. The 4 major forces in the area south of the northern desert were evenly matched, with no single force daring to easily declare war on another. Unless they could guarantee that their own powerhouses would remain unharmed, even if they annihilated another force, they would be wiped out by the remaining 2 forces. The mantis stalks the cicada, unaware of the oriole behind. The higher-ups of the 5-element sect, led by Guo Chong and Chi Yu, stood quietly to the side. It seems our 5-element sect is quite lucky. From the conversation between the higher-ups of the Blade sect and Kang Wolf Fort, Guo Chong, the sectmaster of the 5-element sect, vaguely understood something and couldn't help but laugh. Only then did he realize that Duan Lingtian had originally intended to join the Blade sect, but due to the interference of Kang Wolf Fort, Duan Lingtian had, by chance, ended up in the area east of the northern desert and joined their 5-element sect. This is our 5-element sect's destiny with him. Kiyu's eyes flashed and a gentle smile played on his lips. The him in Kiyu's words naturally referred to Duan Lingtian. I hope Duan Lingtian can bring us a surprise. However, even if they don't find any pill fragments, it's fine. With your comprehension of the 9th-level high-grade water intent and 9th-level high-grade fire intent, breaking through to the Martial Emperor realm is only a matter of time. Gochong looked at Chi Yu, his eyes sparkling like stars. Don't count on me. Chi Yu shook his head. You should know that even if I truly break through to the Martial Emperor realm, I won't continue to stay in the northern desert. You should be clear about what I yearn for. If it weren't for that accident more than 20 years ago, perhaps I wouldn't even be in the northern desert now. As he spoke, Chi Yu's gaze drifted towards the north, filled with longing. I thought you had long given up on the idea of leaving the northern desert to venture into the central region of the Cloud Continent. But I didn't expect you were still thinking of going there. Guochong smiled bitterly, a hint of helplessness in his brows. Some things never change in a lifetime, Chi Yu murmured. Behind the gate covered by a gray light barrier on the stone steps beside the high platform, Duan Lingtian and the others, after 10 hours, finally reached the true end of the stone steps, the stone. Steps led all the way down, and the group finally arrived at a spacious platform. Black mist permeated the area around the platform, completely obscuring the view of what lay within. What is this place? The young disciples from various forces had bewildered expressions on their faces. Duan Lingtian stood on the platform, extending his spiritual energy, intending to probe the situation behind the black mist, but found that an inscription array was obstructing his spiritual energy from approaching. Welcome, young people, from entrance number 2. Suddenly, an old and aged voice emanated from all directions, clearly reaching the ears of everyone present, including Duan Lingtian. For a moment, everyone felt as if they had been struck by lightning. After a brief moment of stunned silence, Duan Lingtian was the first to react, looking around and then confirming, "It's a sound-gathering array." A sound-gathering array is a type of inscription array similar to a sound condensation jade slip. Once a sound-gathering array is set up, one's voice can be condensed within it. When the sound-gathering array is triggered, the voice will spread out and enter the ears of those nearby. The owner of that voice just now is the Martial Emperor powerhouse who left behind this Martial Emperor's hidden treasure. Duan Lingtian took a deep breath, vaguely guessing the other party's identity. "Who's there? Stop playing tricks. Come out if you dare." Many young disciples from various forces, whose faces had turned pale with fright, roared hysterically while looking around, trying to mask their inner fear with their voices. "No need to shout. There's no one else here besides us." Hu Lin, a disciple of the Sun Moon sect, said calmly, his voice not loud but containing elemental energy, easily overpowering the hysterical roars of the disciples from various forces. Immediately, the young disciples from various forces fell silent, their gazes all turning to Hu Lin. "What did you say? You said there's no one else here besides us?" The disciples from various forces looked at Hu Lin with questioning expressions, clearly not quite believing his words. "If you don't believe me, you can ask Duan Lingtian. I think he knows more about what just happened than I do." Facing so many questioning gazes, Hu Lin shrugged, then looked at Duan Lingtian, as if he wanted Duan Lingtian to clean up this mess. As the young disciples from the four major forces, the Five-Element sect, Blade sect, Cloud Sky Temple, and Emotion Severing sect, looked over, Duan Lingtian became the focal point of everyone's attention. Duan Lingtian gave Hu Lin a deep look. He hadn't expected this Sun Moon sect disciple's observational skills to be so astonishing. He knew that Hu Lin said this because he must have seen the realization on his face just now and deduced something from it. Taking a breath, Duan Lingtian's gaze shifted to the group of young disciples, sweeping over them one by one. "He's right. There's no one else here besides us." The young disciples of the four major forces might not believe what Hu Lin said, but they dared not question what Duan Lingtian said. "If there's no one else, what was that voice just now?" "Yeah, we all heard it clearly. It was an aged voice, clearly an old man speaking to us. That old man seemed to be welcoming us." Although the young disciples of the four major forces dared not question Duan Lingtian, they couldn't help but whisper, voicing their doubts. "And old man?" Duan Lingtian shook his head. "Do you think an old man could pass through the inscription array that checks age at the entrance and enter this Martial Emperor's hidden treasure?" As soon as Duan Lingtian said this, the entire scene fell silent. At this point, Duan Lingtian continued, "The voice just now was transmitted by an inscription array called the Sound Gathering Array. The Sound Gathering Array is similar in principle to a sound condensation jade slip. The latter requires a martial artist to activate it with elemental energy and can only be heard by one person. The former, however, can be activated in various ways and can transmit sound in the manner of a normal person speaking." After Duan Lingtian finished speaking in one breath, he added, "Although this sound-gathering array is not a complex inscription array, it requires extremely high spiritual energy. At least, Martial Emperor realm spiritual energy is needed to successfully engrave and set it up. Sound-gathering array? An inscription array that only a Martial Emperor realm inscription master can engrave and set up?" Upon hearing Duan Lingtian's words, including Feng Tianwu, Xuan Bei, and Zhang Yan, the young disciples of the four major forces were all astonished, appearing in a daze and unable to recover for a long time. "You know about the sound-gathering array?" While the young disciples of the four major forces were still recovering, Duan Lingtian's gaze fell on Hu Lin, the Sun Moon sect disciple, and he asked curiously, "I once saw a record of it in an ancient text." Hu Lin nodded. At this moment, the young disciples of the four major forces began to recover one by one. Since that sound-gathering array was left by a Martial Emperor realm inscription master, could that voice just now be his voice? I guess he's very likely. The Martial Emperor powerhouse who left behind this Martial Emperor's hidden treasure. No wonder he said he welcomed us. The young disciples of the four major forces discussed amongst themselves and soon came to a conclusion. The owner of that voice just now was the Martial Emperor powerhouse who left behind the Martial Emperor's hidden treasure. Welcome, young people, from entrance number 2. Just as everyone was still unsettled, that old and aged voice once again came from all directions, clearly reaching the ears of everyone present. This time, with some psychological preparation, everyone did not lose their composure as they had before. However, among the various forces, there were still some timid female disciples whose faces turned pale with fright, their delicate bodies trembling slightly, looking as if they might collapse. Entrance number 2? This time, many people began to analyze the words, confirming something from the Martial Emperor Powerhouse's statement. That Martial Emperor Powerhouse said, "We are young people from entrance number 2? Could it be that in this Martial Emperor's hidden treasure, there are also young people from entrance number 1, entrance number 3, or even entrances number 4 and number 5? Huang Danian's eyes widened, and he questioned with a look of shock. Huang Danian's voice entered the ears of the young disciples from the various major forces present, causing most of them to feel as if they had been struck by lightning. They had originally thought that only they had entered the Martial Emperor's hidden treasure, and since so many had been killed by Duanling Tian just now, the competition wouldn't be intense, and each of them should be able to gain many benefits. But now they realized that those who entered the Martial Emperor's hidden treasure were not just the young disciples of their 6 major forces. This Martial Emperor's hidden treasure had other entrances besides the one they came through. This could be inferred from the Martial Emperor Powerhouse's words just now. What should we do? This Martial Emperor's hidden treasure actually has other entrances. I wonder how strong those young powerhouses who came in from other entrances are. There shouldn't be any young powerhouses from second-rate forces coming in, right? A Blade Sect disciple gasped, muttering to himself. His voice was not loud and did not contain elemental energy, but in the dead silence of the scene it was exceptionally clear, reaching everyone's ears. For a moment, everyone's expressions changed, except for a few young prodigies, including Duanling Tian, Feng Tianwu, Xuan Bei, and Zhang Yan, whose eyes revealed a strong fighting spirit. Exactly. Since this Martial Emperor's secret treasure might have other entrances, those other entrances will definitely be discovered as well. Once discovered, the news will surely spread. At that time, other forces near those exits will definitely send young disciples under 40 to search for treasures within the Martial Emperor's secret treasure. The treasures inside the Martial Emperor's secret treasure would tempt even second-rate forces. Second-rate. Forces are superior to the third-rate forces they belong to, and they even have Martial Emperor powerhouses guarding them. In such forces, there will certainly be no shortage of young disciples with extraordinary talent and monstrous comprehension, and the overall strength of those young disciples will definitely surpass theirs. After all, they are, at best, disciples of third-rate forces. Moreover, this time, let alone the young disciples of second-rate forces entering. Even if young disciples from other third-rate forces enter through other entrances, they will feel immense pressure, because that means more people will be sharing the spoils with them. The young disciples of second-rate forces are generally stronger than them. If they encounter them, they can only be abused, unable to win fights or snatch treasures, and in the end they can only leave empty-handed. And they might not even be able to leave empty-handed. Who knows if among those young disciples of second-rate forces, there are some with violent temperaments who will try to kill them without distinguishing right from wrong as soon as they see them. Thinking of this, most disciples of the various forces felt immense pressure. Perhaps among the disciples of our 5-element sect, only Senior Brother Duanling Tian is not afraid of the young disciples of second-rate forces. Even Senior Brother Chen, Senior Brother Yi, and Senior Brother Dan, if they were to encounter the outstanding young disciples of second-rate forces, they would probably suffer losses. A disciple of the 5-element sect took a deep breath, his gaze first falling on Duanling Tian, then sweeping over Nangong Chen, Nangong Yi, and Huang Danyu, speaking with a look of apprehension. The other disciples of the 5-element sect all agreed with this disciple's words. They had witnessed Senior Brother Duanling Tian's strength. They believed that even the most outstanding among the younger generation of second-rate forces might not be a match for their senior brother. Duanling Tian, what's there to be afraid of? Anyway, I've already decided that on this trip to the Martial Emperor's secret treasure, I'll just follow behind Senior Brother Duanling Tian. With Senior Brother Duanling Tian around, even if I don't get too many treasures, at least I can save my life. Soon, some disciples of the 5-element sect focused their gaze on Duanling Tian, speaking with a determined expression. I also want to follow Senior Brother Duanling Tian. The treasures in this Martial Emperor's secret treasure are good, but they are far less important than one's own life. That's natural. If treasures are lost, at most it's a pity for a while. If life is lost, then everything is lost. Life is more important than anything. I've decided I also want to stay by Senior Brother Duanling Tian's side. A group of 5-element sect disciples discussed animatedly, while also looking with fervent gazes at the purple-clad young man not far away, Duanling Tian. Currently, Duanling Tian stood there, looking around as if observing something. At the same time, apart from the 2 remaining disciples of the Sun Moon sect, all the disciples of the Blade and Sword sect began to approach Feng Tianwu, wanting to seek her protection. The disciples of the Cloud Sky Temple also followed closely behind Xuan Bei, the strongest among the younger generation of the Yi. Cloud Sky Temple. The Profound Love sect now had only 8 people left. Zhang Yan stood there looking calm and composed, his mood not disturbed by the news of other entrances to the Martial Emperor's secret treasure. Qifeng, Qin Kong, and the other 5 Profound Love sect disciples followed closely by Zhang. Yan's sighed. Zhang Yan was not afraid, but that did not mean they were not afraid. Brother Duan. Seeing Duan Lingtian frown, Feng Tianwu, who stood beside him, had a hint of confusion on her pretty face, vaguely realizing that her brother Duan might have discovered something. Not far away, Huang Danyu, Su Li, and Zhang Shouyang also noticed. Something was amiss immediately. Duan Lingtian, what's wrong? Huang Danyu asked in a booming voice, his tone laced with a hint of urgency. Huang Danyu's voice was like a clap of thunder, momentarily causing the young disciples of all forces to look over, their gazes uniformly falling on Duan Lingtian. The path ahead for us? I'm afraid we'll all have to walk it alone. Duan Lingtian's furrowed brow relaxed, and then he slowly said, Huh? Hearing Duan Lingtian's words, everyone looked confused, completely bewildered. And just then, the ancient, aged voice continued, Little ones who entered through entrance number 2, as long as you enter the surrounding black mist, you will soon enter the true Martial Emperor's secret treasure. Within the Martial Emperor's secret treasure, there are many treasures I have accumulated throughout my life. Among them, the most precious are 5 Emperor tier profound fragments. Additionally, in the central area of the Martial Emperor's secret treasure I left behind, there is a palace. That is where I passed away peacefully. The wealth I accumulated throughout my life has been scattered throughout the Ampinduru, Martial Emperor's secret realm. To obtain it, you must search for it yourselves. In the place where I passed away peacefully, the only things you can obtain are the 2 Emperor tier profound fragments, and 1 Imperial tier profound fragment from within my body. The ancient, aged voice stopped abruptly after speaking here. In an instant, including Duan Lingtian, the young disciples of all major forces present were stunned in place. Their eyes, without exception, narrowed and gleaming brightly. 8. 8 profound fragments? I didn't hear wrong, did I? Huang Danyu gasped, muttering in disbelief. You didn't hear wrong? It is indeed 8 profound fragments. 7 Emperor tier profound fragments, and 1 Imperial tier profound fragment. Zhang Shouyang shook his head, saying with a dazed expression, he looked somewhat lost, his mind having long since drifted elsewhere. Imperial tier profound fragment? What is that? Feng Tianwu frowned, her pretty face filled with confusion. The profundities mastered by Martial Emperor powerhouses are generally Emperor tier profundities. A 9th level Martial Emperor powerhouse, if they want to break through to the Martial Emperor realm, must first comprehend Imperial tier profundities. Imperial tier profundities are the pass for a 9th level Martial Emperor powerhouse to enter the Martial Emperor realm. Hearing Feng Tianwu's question, Duan Lingtian responded, while sifting through the memories of the reincarnation Martial Emperor. The significance of Imperial tier profundities for a 9th level Martial Emperor powerhouse is similar to the significance of Void Transformation Intent for a 9th level Void Transformation Martial Artist, and the significance of Emperor tier profundities for a 9th level Void Transformation Martial Artist. If one does not comprehend it, it is difficult for their cultivation to break through to the next realm. If we say, a 9th level Void Transformation Powerhouse, without comprehending Emperor tier profundities, cannot break through to the Martial Emperor realm and become a Martial Emperor Powerhouse. Then, a 9th level Martial Emperor Powerhouse, if they do not comprehend Imperial tier profundities, likewise cannot break through to the Martial Emperor realm and become a Martial Emperor Powerhouse. Duan Lingtian explained word by word. These pieces of information, naturally, were all learned from the memories of the reincarnation Martial Emperor. Whoosh! As soon as Duan Lingtian said this, the entire scene erupted in an uproar. Although everyone present, upon hearing the Imperial tier profound fragment in the Martial Emperor Powerhouse's message, had guessed that it should be related to a Martial Emperor Powerhouse. However, upon learning the specific function of the Imperial tier profound fragment, they still couldn't help but gasp. So, the Imperial tier profound fragment is even more precious than the Emperor tier profound fragment. Huang Danyu's breathing became rapid, and he panted heavily, his chest heaving like a bellows, taking a long time to calm down. That is natural, Duan Lingtian nodded, saying with a solemn expression, the difficulty for a 9th level Martial Emperor Powerhouse to break through to the Martial Emperor realm is more than 100 times greater than that for a 9th level void transformation martial artist to break through to the Martial Emperor realm. And the reason for all of this is that they find it difficult to comprehend Imperial tier profundities, but if they have suitable Imperial tier profound fragments, they can use them to instantly comprehend Imperial tier profundities and achieve Martial Emperor realm cultivation, becoming a Martial Emperor. Powerhouse. By the end of his explanation, Duanling Tian's emotions couldn't help but surge, his eyes shining brightly, sparkling with light. Imperial tier profound fragment. He had to admit, he was tempted. The Martial Emperor Powerhouse's message said that as long as we enter the surrounding black mist, we will enter the true Martial Emperor's secret treasure. A disciple from an unknown force spoke, and in an instant, apart from Duanling Tian, everyone's gaze fell upon the black mist surrounding their platform. Let's go. Zhang Yan gave an order, and leading Qifeng, Qin Kong, and the other 5 profound love sect disciples, they flew out one by one, plunging into the black mist surrounding the platform. In a flash, the figures of the 8 profound love sect disciples, including Zhang Yan, disappeared from the sight of Duanling Tian and the others. Duanling Tian, I'm going in first too. At this moment, Xuanbei nodded at Duanling Tian, and after greeting him, he flew into the surrounding black mist. Behind him, 19 Cloud Sky Temple disciples, including Wu Chen, followed closely. The 2 disciples of the Sun Moon sect, after a friendly nod to Duanling Tian, also flew into the black mist. Duanling Tian, you killed so many Sun Moon sect disciples. These 2 guys don't seem to hate you at all. Not only that, they even greeted you so amicably. Huang Danyo looked at the direction the 2 Sun Moon sect disciples had left, unable to help but feel a little surprised. They are smart people, Duanling Tian said with a faint smile. I admit that. If they weren't smart, they would. Probably be in 2 or 3 pieces by now, just like the other Sun Moon sect disciples. Thinking of Duanling Tian's earlier actions on the high platform, Huang Danyu still felt a chill down his spine whenever he recalled it. Who could have imagined that Duanling Tian, who usually appeared gentle and humble, would have such a bloodthirsty side? At that time, Duanling Tian was like a Shura who had crawled out of purgatory. In his rage, blood flowed like rivers and bodies piled up like mountains. Brother Duan, let's go in together too, Feng Tianwu called out to Duanling. Tian, perhaps we can't go in together. Facing Feng Tianwu's greeting, Duanling Tian shook his head. Why? Feng Tianwu was stunned, her pretty face filled with confusion. Including Huang Danu and the other 5 element sect disciples, as well as the blade and sword sect disciples, all looked at Duanling Tian with puzzled expressions, not understanding what he meant. I've investigated the black mist around us. There are numerous inscription formations that create illusions, far more than I imagined. Duanling Tian took a deep breath, looking at the surrounding black mist with a wary expression, and murmured, The purpose of these inscription formations is only one, to separate those who enter, scattering them to every corner of the Martial Emperor's secret treasure. As someone who had integrated the memories of the reincarnation Martial Emperor, Duanling Tian naturally knew the significance of the inscription formations within the black mist, because in some games the reincarnation Martial Emperor used to play, there were similar inscription formations. The main purpose was to separate groups of people, scattering them to various locations for cruel survival tests, where the strong preyed on the weak and only the fittest survived. Only those who survived, in the end, would receive a reward. So that's how it is. Feng Tianwu suddenly understood. Huang Danu looked at Duanling Tian and said with a wry smile, I originally thought of staying by your side for more protection. Now it seems my idea is going to fall through. Whoosh! Whoosh! As soon as Huang Danu finished speaking, 2 figures shot out like the wind, entering the black mist surrounding the platform in a flash, their figures disappearing from sight. It's Senior Brother Chen and Senior Brother Yi, a 5-element sect disciple exclaimed. Let's go. Duanling Tian raised an eyebrow, stepped forward, and walked towards the black mist surrounding the platform, preparing to enter the Martial Emperor's secret treasure. Feng Tianwu, Huang Danu, Su Li, and Zheng Shuyong followed him. Soon Duan, Ling Tian noticed, a group of 5-element sect disciples and a group of blade and sword sect disciples, as if disbelieving his words, followed their group of 5 in a cluster, which made him feel quite helpless for a moment. Are these guys really thinking I was lying to them just now? Duanling Tian couldn't help but smile wryly. However, he didn't say much more. As soon as the group entered the black mist, they would naturally realize that everything he said was true. Moments later, the group led by Duanling Tian, in a grand procession, walked towards the black mist surrounding the platform. Duanling Tian was the first to enter the black mist, his figure disappearing from view. Feng Tianwu, Huang Danu, Su Li, and Zhang Shouyong followed closely behind. Behind the four of them, a group of 5 element sect and blade and sword sect disciples followed one by one, all entering the black. Mist, their figures completely hidden within. For a time, the vast platform surrounded by black mist became empty and deserted. After Duan Lingtian entered the black mist, he felt a flash before his eyes and then found himself alone in a vast grassland. The grassland was beautiful, lush, and stretched as far as the eye could see. Head northwest. At the end of the grassland is the true entrance to the Martial Emperor's secret treasure. At the same time, an old, aged voice clearly entered Duan Lingtian's ears. It was the message left by the Martial Emperor who had left behind the Martial Emperor's secret treasure. It seems that among the many inscription formations in the black mist that can create illusions, there are more or less some sound-gathering formations mixed in, Duan Lingtian thought to himself. Although he knew that everything before him was an illusion, Duan Lingtian also knew that he had to follow the Martial Emperor's message. Only then could he enter the true Martial Emperor's secret treasure. At this moment, being in the illusion, he was destined to part ways with everyone else, each going their own way. I should be able to fly here, right? Duan Lingtian thought to himself. As soon as the thought crossed his mind, he tried to step into the air, leaping up, and his entire body ascended. Indeed! Discovering that this place was not covered by a no-fly formation, Duan Lingtian couldn't help but breathe a sigh of relief. Such a large grassland, while not impossible for him to run across, would be much more strenuous than flying. As expected of an illusion created by inscription formations, inscribed and arranged by a martial emperor, it's truly sturdy. As Duan Lingtian flew out, he couldn't help but extend his spiritual power, attempting to shake the illusion he was in, but ultimately found that the illusion remained completely still. He was mentally prepared for this, so he wasn't surprised. Those were inscription formations set up by a martial emperor. If he could truly shake them, he would be shocked instead. There shouldn't be any trials in this illusion, right? Duan Lingtian's heart stirred, and he murmured. Soon, not long after flying out, a wry smile couldn't help but appear on Duan Lingtian's face. It seems I really have a jinxed mouth. This inscription formation that creates the illusion actually has some attacking inscription formations mixed in. Almost at the same time as Duan Lingtian's wry smile, a series of strong winds suddenly swept through the air he was passing through. The vast winds swept across the sky, engulfing Duan Lingtian. The strong winds raged, and solid green wind blades followed like shadows, overwhelming him from all directions, as if trying to tear him to shreds. Whew! Extending his spiritual power and sensing the strength of these strong winds and wind blades, Duan Lingtian breathed a sigh of relief. The strength of these strong winds and wind blades was at most comparable to a 5th or 6th level void transformation. Stage martial artist who had comprehended 5th or 6th level intermediate wind profound meaning, posing no threat to him. Swoosh! Duan Lingtian's gaze turned slightly cold, and he unleashed a punch with full force, as if a stone had shattered the sky. Boom, 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 boom. Immediately, a series of thunderous air explosions continuously rang out, sweeping across the sky, captivating one's mind. Boom! A loud bang erupted. It was Duan Lingtian's punch, containing the power of 800 ancient horned dragons, colliding like a cannonball with the strong winds and the wind blades that followed. The winds like shadows. First level void transformation stage cultivation with full elemental force burst was comparable to the power of 200 ancient horned dragons. Second level advanced wind profound meaning was comparable to the power of 300 ancient horned dragons. The 3 kinds of 9th level void insight, profound meanings, combined, also amounted to the power of 300 ancient horned dragons. Such a powerful force swept out, crushing the strong winds and wind blades like dry leaves, causing them to completely dissipate before Duan Lingtian. Boom, 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 boom. After crushing the sky, full of strong winds and wind blades, the power surging from Duan Lingtian's fist tore through the sky with undiminished momentum, once again stirring up a series of ear-piercing air explosions. It wasn't until the power completely disappeared from Duan Lingtian's sight that the surrounding void returned to calm. Awesome. Duan Lingtian, who had thrown a full-force punch, exhaled a breath of turbid air in satisfaction. With that punch, he held nothing back. His elemental force erupted, and his 4 profound meanings followed like shadows, making his entire body surge with blood boiling. Go! After catching his breath, Duan Lingtian continued to fly in the direction mentioned in the Martial Emperor's message, which was northwest, heading towards the true Martial Emperor's secret treasure. Along the way, Duan Lingtian was continuously interfered with by some attacking inscription formations. However, in the face of his overwhelming power, the forces extended by those inscription formations were all shattered by a single punch, without any surprise. Duan Lingtian, who had comprehended 3 9th-level Void Insight Profound meanings, and 1 2nd-level Void Transformation Profound meaning, and whose cultivation had broken through to the 1st-level Void Transformation stage, moved through this illusion like an invincible beast, charging head-on. I wonder how the others are doing. 10 days later, Duan Lingtian still hadn't entered the true Martial Emperor's secret treasure. Bored, he couldn't help but think of the others. He knew that the others' current situation and experiences must be similar to his own. The purpose of this inscription formation is to place me in one corner of the Martial Emperor's secret treasure. I've been traveling at full speed for 10 days, and I still haven't reached my destination. Thinking of this, Duan Lingtian couldn't help but smile wryly. However, he also knew that he had no other choice but to continue on his way diligently. Only then could he enter the true Martial Emperor's secret treasure. The Northern Desert, from its central region all the way to its northern region, formed 2 distinct worlds compared to the areas west, south, and east of the Northern Desert. In the latter, third-rate forces could reign supreme. However, in the former, which is the central region of the Northern Desert and the area north of it, there were 3 powerful forces, also the 3 behemoths of the Northern Desert. These 3 behemoths, without exception, were all second-rate forces. Second-rate forces in the Cloud Continent were all forces with a multitude of experts, and most importantly, they had Martial Emperor powerhouses guarding them, far beyond what third-rate forces could. Compare to. At the border between the central region of the Northern Desert and the area north of the Northern Desert, there was a mountain range that stretched across, desolate and rarely visited all year round. Today, however, many people came. Whoosh! 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 Swift figures came from the north, soaring across the sky, and in a flash arrived above the transverse mountain range. There were 11 people in total. The leader was a cold-faced, thin old man dressed in gray. As he flew through the air, gusts of wind began to diverge in front of him. This showed the depth of the old man's cultivation. Behind the gray-clad old man followed 8 young men and 2 young women. They all had one thing in common. They all appeared to be under 40 years old. "Grand Elder, are we late?" Behind the gray-clad old man, a handsome young man with sword-like eyebrows and star-like eyes, dressed in green, carrying a sheathed longsword on his back, couldn't help. "But ask, just a few hours?" "No matter." The gray-clad old man shook his head, appearing completely unconcerned. Moments later, the gray-clad old man swooped down, leading the 10 young men and women into the transverse mountain range, landing above a valley. Above the valley, 2 old men were already standing separately, as if integrated with the heavens and earth.